other book in the Bible. Look at it any way you want to, but this is a great story. It absolutely reads like a movie that you'd see on the Lifetime channel. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about Esther today. So to start us off, what I'm going to offer to you is the top 10 list of interesting facts about the book of Esther. Number 10. Before becoming king Ahasuerus' wife, Esther was a Jewish orphan. Number 9. Martin Luther opposed the inclusion of the story of Esther in the original canon. Number 8. The story provides insight into the origins of the Jewish feast of Purim. Number 7. The story includes several public executions and an order for genocide. Number 6. Much of the action takes place at banquets. Number 5. King Ahasuerus was an insomniac. Number 4. The literary form of Esther is an historic novella. Number 3. There's an additional 6 chapters that can be found in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Bible. Number 2, Victoria Principal played Esther in a 1978 miniseries on television. And the number 1 top 10 interesting fact about the book of Esther: God is never mentioned. Now, that to me is incredible. That God is never mentioned anywhere in the book of Esther. Not through the entire story, but certainly God was on Esther's side. Let me fill in some of the blanks for you. Now, King Ahasuerus lived in Susa, which was the capital of Persia. And he was in the middle of a 180-day feast. My kind of guy. While he's in high spirits, if you will, because of the wine that he's been drinking, he requests that the Queen Vashti come out so that he can kind of show her off to all the people there at the banquet. When they send word to get Vashti to come out, she refuses to come out, which of course infuriates the king. So he asks his wise men, what he should do. They say, well, you know, king, if word gets out that this woman didn't do what you told her to do, the women are going to get really riled up, so we can't let them know, so let's just depose her. So they get rid of Vashti. Quiet. So, there's an extra spot here to be filled. So what the king does is he requests that all of the beautiful maidens come before him so that he can choose a new queen. He does so, and he chooses Esther, who was an orphan daughter of a Benjaminite. She was originally named Hadassah, meaning myrtle. She had spent her whole life among the Jewish exiles in Persia, where she lived under the protection of her cousin, Mordecai. Now, when Cyrus gave permission for the exiles to go back to Jerusalem, Esther, Mordecai, they all stayed behind in Persia. But when Esther is chosen to be in the king's harem, Mordecai tells her, don't let anybody know that you're Jewish. Now, Mordecai was also Jewish, but he had risen through the ranks and was now a chief minister to the king, and he also lived in Susa. So one night while he's standing out by the palace gates, he overhears a plot by 2 people who want to kill the king. So he tells this to Esther, who then tells the king about the plot, and they're able to execute, public execute, there's execution number 1, these 2 conspirators who were going to kill the king, and they write this event down in the Royal Chronicles. So it goes. Haman is one of the king's advisors. And he commanded Mordecai to show obedience to him. Now, when Mordecai refuses to prostrate himself, Haman goes to the king and says, the Jews were a useless and turbulent people and inclined to disloyalty, and he promised to pay 10,000 silver talents into the royal treasury for permission to pillage and exterminate this alien race. There's your genocide. The king then issues a proclamation ordering the confiscation of all Jewish property and a general extermination of all Jews within the empire. Here's the thing about the king's proclamation. Once it is given, you can't take it back. Now, Mordecai, of course, was very upset about this, and of course, Esther, who is sheltered in the harem, doesn't know anything until Mordecai comes and tells her. And he tells her, don't think you're safe just because you're in the king's harem. Make sure you don't tell the king that you're Jewish. Now, at this point, Esther comes up with a plan. And she says to Mordecai, order in general a 3-day fast. And so he does. Mordecai orders a fast for 3 days. Now, Esther could not approach the king because if she just went on her own, she could be killed. But the king hadn't summoned her in 30 days, which kind of meant that maybe she had fallen out of favor. Nevertheless, at her own risk, after the 3-day fast, she gets dressed up in her royal garments and she goes to the king. A risk, a big risk. And the king asks, Esther, what can I do for you? You can have anything you want. And she says, all I want you to do is to come to a banquet tomorrow with Haman. And so they do. And they come and they have this wonderful banquet, and at the end of the banquet, they accept another invitation to come back the following day. Now, Haman is so overjoyed with the attention that he's getting that he issues an order for a gallows to be built 75 feet high where he's going to hang Mordecai. But that night, the king can't sleep. So he orders someone to read to him the royal chronicles, and he is reminded of what Mordecai did for him in saving his life. And he gets up the next day and he asks Haman, hey, what do you think I should do for one whom the king desires to honor? Well, Haman thinks it's him. So he says, nice clothes, fine robes, a little money, big celebration. He was talking about Mordecai. Haman then is more mad or more angry than ever before. We're now at the second banquet, and when the banquet is finished, the king then says again to Esther, what is it that I can do for you? I will give you half of my kingdom if that's what you desire. Kings, unfortunately, in this time are giving women half of their kingdom. I can't understand it, but we're still doing it. Esther takes another chance and tells the king that she is a Jew, and asks the king and tells the king that you have made a proclamation that all of my people should be killed. The king is very disturbed, and he says, who would make or would suggest to me such a proclamation? Again, another risk. She points and says it was Haman. Haman is an evil man. So the king then, desiring to please Esther and knowing that this is the wrong thing to do, hangs Haman from the gallows that was supposed to be for Mordecai. And he gives all of Mordecai's possessions and everything that he owned to Mordecai. And then passed another proclamation. You remember what the first proclamation said? they can't rescind that. But in the second proclamation, he allows the Jews to defend themselves. And in that way, when that fight started, the Jews were able to conquer and win the war that ensued to save their own people. And that's where the Feast of Purim comes from in the Jewish faith. The date of the Feast of Purim is around the date, the times of when this battle took place, and the battle was won. It's quite a story. The only one of its kind in the Bible. Now, the lectionary, as we read it today, leaves out some of the more brutal images of this story. And you can go to your Bible later, you can go yourselves and find out what they are. But I do think that the exclusion of those images serves a specific purpose. And that is that it allows us to focus on Esther's courage and willingness to take a risk to save her people. Now, this past week, I have been following intently, as I'm sure a lot of you have been following, the events surrounding the visit of Pope Francis here in the United States. And like any other visit from a foreign dignitary, everything regarding this trip is very tightly scripted. And I've marveled at the Pope's stamina as I have watched him move from event to event with a grace that can only come from a deep spirituality. But what's impressed me most has been the passion that he has shown in his talks when he goes off script. Now, he did this several times yesterday when his major themes were God's love for all his children and social justice concerns, especially the issue regarding marginalized populations. Marginalized in that still exist groups of people, even here in the United States, that do not or are not accepted into the mainstream of life. Now, our society still marginalizes people in all sorts of ways. Race, color, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, economic status, social status, physicality, mentality, age, older, younger, and religion. Esther was a member of a marginalized population. She was female in a society that gave little or no standing to females. Look how she was judged by her beauty. And look how she was treated socially. She was a part of a harem. Yet the story of Esther is one of courage and empowerment as she ignores the social conventions of the day and takes the necessary risks to save her people. Now, I think it was fitting yesterday that the Pope used the setting of Freedom Hall in Philadelphia and used the podium that Abraham Lincoln used in the Gettysburg Address to speak about marginalized populations in the United States. In this case, he talked about the immigrant. Now, Francis, if you've been hearing some of his speeches, begins most of them with, I come from a family of immigrants. Just as all of you, he says, were immigrants at one time. The Pope called upon these immigrants yesterday afternoon to be proud of their heritage and that they had much to offer to others. Francis also called upon the society in general to treat those marginalized people as we would have ourselves be treated. If you saw the talk at the UN, he invokes the golden rule. How simple. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Now, there's no denying that there are issues to be dealt with regarding the treatment of those who feel any form of oppression. But when we are dealing with these issues, we need to first consider that they, like everyone else who walks the face of this planet, are children of God. And so, I leave you with a challenge. How best to serve those pushed aside? how best can each of us express God's love for all his children? Christ tells us specifically that however you treat the least of you, you do the same to me. Are we listening?